once again, Ron DeSantis is sort of teeing himself up to look like a fraud. He sent out a fundraising email just yesterday accusing President Joe Biden of being an out of touch executive. So that might or might not be true. We can certainly have a debate about that. But it also came 1 hour after the Washington Post reported that he and his wife have flown on private jets funded by wealthy donors at least a dozen times. And that isn't necessarily the worst bit of news in the area of corruption that we're gonna be covering. First of all, bear in mind that it's good that we have this information. Getting this sort of information in the future might be more difficult because remember, DeSantis has signed bills that have really shielded him from scrutiny. So information about past and future travels from journalists won't be able to find that, political opponents, people who visit the governor's mansion now being shielded. So a lot of legislation being passed specifically to advantage Ron DeSantis, but not quickly enough for him to have avoided us finding out that one of his donors supplied a golf simulator to his cabana. And look, no golf simulator seems cheap, but these in particular, very expensive. About golf simulators that require installation, like a team comes in and installs them, start at $27,500 and they can run up to and past $69,500. So these are very hoity-toity little toys indeed, and his donors are giving them. It would be one thing if he was blowing his money on it, but a donor to give you something worth like a Mercedes. I don't know, if you're gonna continue to pitch yourself as some sort of like warrior against the elites, I think you're gonna have to do more than just insult Disney to overcome these sorts of stories.
I also love the fact that he got married at Disney. Like, like to me, there's a lot of things about him that I think when you start to peel back the onion layers, the onion looks rotten. I'm not actually a very big fan. I was thinking about the Anita Bryant campaign, the Save the Children campaign in the 70s, and how Florida was such a huge crusader against basically don't say gay then. And it's so interesting how applicable that is to today's fight of what we're going through, especially with the trans community, how they've just used the same rhetoric for homophobia against transphobia. I think people don't want to stand for it. People want to educate their own children. They have family members who might be LGBTQ. They have family members that might be people of color or are people of color themselves and want their children to be educated. So the thing that we have now that 1977 didn't have is the internet. There's no way you're gonna stop this new generation from learning and from finding out what the truth of the matter is and how people are treated unfairly. And I think that's his biggest opponent is the truth.
Yeah, and I think that sort of culture war still works for a lot of older people and some young people, but I do feel like it's a bad long-term strategy. I don't think that there's gonna be a huge amount of people that are working their way up through high school and college right now that are gonna feel like this is all that politics should be about, is trying to annihilate the LGBTQ community. But that's the gamble that they're making. I'm sure that if there was a caravan working its way up through Mexico, they'd talk about that instead. But in the absence of that, I mean, what are you gonna talk about? Like retirement and housing prices and health insurance and the cost of college? Nah, nobody's got time for that.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.